All right, let's just jump right in. We all tend to think of Islamic philosophy as this towering pillar of global intellectual history. But what if I told you that one of the most powerful challenges to its very legitimacy didn't come from the outside, but from deep within the Islamic tradition itself?
And that brings us to this really provocative question. Is Islamic philosophy actually Islamic? I mean, that's a huge thing to ask. It's a question that creates this major collision between revelation and reason, between faith and what some see as foreign influence. And, well, one particular school of thought has a very clear and very controversial answer.
So, let's meet them. They're called the Maktab-e Tafkīk, and that word tafkīk, that is the key to this whole thing. It literally means separation. Their entire mission, their whole reason for existing, is to untangle or separate what they consider pure, divine knowledge from the messy, flawed, and in their view, foreign systems of human thought like philosophy.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to unpack this challenge from within. Then we'll get to know this school of separation. We'll lay out their full case against philosophy, then look at a powerful counterargument, and finally, we'll ask, what's the real price of this quest for purity?
Okay, let's get right into our first section, a challenge from within. See, to really get what the Tafkīk school's all about, you have to understand this isn't some outside attack. This is a family argument, a debate happening inside the house, which honestly makes it all the more intense and fascinating.
And just so you know where we're getting all this, our entire discussion is grounded in a detailed academic paper from 2025. It systematically breaks down the arguments of the Tafkīk school and really puts their claims to the test, so we're standing on some pretty solid scholarly ground here. Now that this stage is set, let's move on and meet the architects of this whole challenge. Let's get to know the school of separation. Who are these thinkers, and what exactly are they trying to accomplish? So this movement kicked off about a century ago in Khorasan, a region in Iran with a super rich intellectual history of its own. And their goal was, and still is, pretty radical, to purify Islamic knowledge. They look at disciplines like philosophy and mysticism and see them as foreign, human inventions that have, well, contaminated the pure message of the Quran. Their whole project is to scrape away these human layers to get back to the original untouched revelation.
And you know, a movement like this always has its key players. It all started with Mirza Mahdī Isfahānī. He was the founder, totally uncompromising. Then his students, like Sheikh Mujtaba Qazvīnī, carried the torch. It wasn't until 1992 that Muḥammad Ḥakīmī actually gave the movement its official name, and it's still alive today with figures like Sayyid Saydān representing its views. Okay, here we go. This is the main event. Section 3, the case against philosophy. We're about to break down the two core arguments the Tafkīk school uses to try and prove that philosophy has no legitimate place within an Islamic framework.
It really all boils down to two big claims. First, the problem of origin. They basically argue that philosophy isn't homegrown, it's a foreign import from ancient Greece, and therefore it has no authentic connection to Islam. Second, the problem of method. They believe human reason is fundamentally flawed, and their proof? They just point to the philosophers themselves. They've been arguing for centuries and can't seem to agree on anything. For the Tafkīk school, all that disagreement is the ultimate sign of failure.
And just listen to how the founder, Isfahānī, puts it. This quote is absolutely stunning. He isn't saying the Quran is meant to correct human knowledge or even to guide it. No. He's saying its purpose is to eliminate it, to uproot it completely. This is not a critique. It's basically a declaration of war on human reason itself.
So how does he justify such a radical view? Well, Isfahānī creates this super sharp, unbridgeable divide. On one side he puts what he calls ilm-e-qadim, or old knowledge. That's all the human stuff, flawed, foreign, Greek, all of philosophy and mysticism. On the other side, there's ilm-e-jadīd, or new knowledge. This is divine, pure, Islamic revelation, in other words, the Quran. And for him, these two are polar opposites. You have to choose one.
And this gets us back to their second huge argument. I mean, try to see it from their perspective for a second. If reason was such a reliable path to truth, wouldn't all the great thinkers from Plato to Al-Farabi to Avicenna have eventually agreed on the big questions? The fact that they constantly disagree on fundamental issues is proof, for the Tafkīk school, that their whole method is built on nothing more than conjecture and guesswork.
So that's the case from the prosecution. But the academic paper we're looking at mounts a really powerful defense. So let's move on to Section 4, a counter-argument of fallacies. This is where the authors essentially turn the tools of logic back against the Tafkīk school itself.
And here's the crucial point. The critique argues that the Tafkīk school's case isn't actually built on solid reasoning. Instead, it relies on what's called sophistry, which is just a fancy word for arguments that sound really clever and persuasive, but are actually full of rhetorical tricks and logical errors.
In fact, the paper points to 5 specific types of these fallacies. First, the sophism of origin. That's dismissing an idea just because of where it came from, like saying, it's Greek, so it must be bad. Second, ad hominem attacks, where they attack the motives of the people who translated philosophy instead of engaging with the ideas themselves. Third, the classic straw man, where they misrepresent what philosophy is all about just to make it easier to knock down. Fourth is poisoning the well. They set it up so their view is the only true Islamic one, so anyone who disagrees is automatically wrong. And finally, they use incomplete quotes to twist what philosophers actually meant.
And this quote just brilliantly flips the Tafkīk school's main argument right on its head. They see disagreement as proof of failure. But this counter-argument says disagreement isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the engine of progress. It's how ideas get tested and refined. The moment everyone agrees on everything, well, that's the moment thinking itself has stopped.
So after that really powerful counter-argument, we come to our final section, the price of purity. After weighing the school's claims against the critique of their methods, what's the paper's final verdict here?
The conclusion is pretty blunt. The paper finds the school's whole critique to be reductionist, meaning it oversimplifies complex ideas, dogmatic because it acts like its views are absolute truth, and inconsistent because it often uses the very logic it claims to reject.
And here's why this all matters. The critique suggests that in this passionate search for a pure religion, the Tafkīk school ends up prioritizing judgment over understanding. It dismisses a huge, incredible intellectual heritage, one that didn't just shape Islamic civilization, but literally all of human history, without ever really engaging with it on its own terms. So we're left with this huge question, right? And it goes way beyond the specific debate in Iran. For any tradition, any culture, any belief system, where do you draw that line? At what point does the noble goal of preserving a tradition risk becoming an act of isolating it from the shared, messy, and ongoing conversation of human thought? It's definitely something to think about.